how do we maintain a positive mental health? Is there a way? Is it only through mental health treatment that I could maintain a positive or a healthy mental health? Well, I'm going to give you practical advice. I'll give you practical advice. There's 8 ways that if people engage in these 8 dimensions of wellness, their quality of life goes to a whole nother level. It goes to a whole nother level. And so these 8 dimensions of wellness you come from a program, a federal program called SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse of Mental Health and Administration, something along those lines. And there's been lots and lots of studies that speak about the benefits of these 8. And so I encourage you that as you're hearing these 8, you ask yourself, how am I doing in these areas? How am I doing in these areas? And so I'll start with the first dimension. The first dimension is called the physical dimension. There's 3 pillars for you to focus on that physical dimension. One is exercise. We as human beings have been hunters and gatherers for thousands of years. Our bodies are designed to be physically active. And it's not till the blink of a second that we are in front of computers, sitting for hours and not having lots of movement. And so, because our bodies are not designed to be sitting down all the time, if we are not physically active, it affects our mental health. There was a pretty interesting study where they gathered a group of people who were dealing with mild to moderate depression. And they divided this group into 3 subgroups. In one of the groups, they provided them with antidepressants. So these are medications that help people deal with depression. To the other group, they said, okay, what you guys are going to do, you guys are going to engage in physical exercise. And the third group, what they did, also known as a control group, they said, no medication, no exercise. We'll see how you do on your own. Well, to the surprise of the researchers, they found that the people who were exercising were getting the same, if not more, benefit than the people taking antidepressants. Now, I'm not here to say that people shouldn't take medication. We are speaking about individuals who had mild to moderate depression. Sometimes depression could be so severe that medication becomes a very good option. But what I'm saying is that exercise can make the biggest difference on how we feel. When we exercise, our body releases these chemicals called dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. What is dopamine?
Feel-good chemical.
Beautiful. It's a chemical that helps us feel good. But here's an interesting thing about dopamine. It not only helps us feel good, but it helps us stay motivated. People with low levels of dopamine, they're unmotivated. They don't want to do things. Hence, we see many times that people who suffer from depression lack energy, lack motivation because there's low levels of dopamine. When people exercise, dopamine level goes up. So we're more likely to have energy, to feel motivated, and to feel good. So thank you for, stating that. The other chemical that is crucial in our mental health is endorphins. And endorphins, similar to dopamine, is a chemical that we naturally create that helps us feel good, like dopamine. But here's an interesting thing about endorphins. Endorphins are also painkillers. So if we don't create healthy levels of endorphins, what will happen is you'll be more achy. My neck, my back, my head. And sometimes if it's not physical pain, it could be emotional pain, which some people say might even be worse. So exercising is a very good way to increase those chemicals. In terms of the physical dimension, there's other two things that are vital. Good sleep, sometimes known as sleep hygiene. Depending on the stage of life is the amount of years that is recommended for someone to sleep. Babies, for instance, they sleep more. For adults like ourselves, it's usually anywhere from 7 to 9 hours. And every individual is a bit different. Our chemistry is a little bit different. So for some, again, for some people might be 9 hours. For some people, maybe 7 hours. And so hence why many times we hear, oh, did you get your 8 hours of sleep? Because it's right in the middle. It's right in the middle. The third pillar of the physical dimension, is good nutrition. Good nutrition. Many people relate good nutrition with physical health. And most definitely, if we eat well, we're going to feel physically well. But I don't know, for some reason, there are people that separate mental health from physical health. And if you ask me, it's all the same thing. Because our brain is part of our physical body. So if we don't feel well in our brain, emotionally, we're not going to feel well physically. And hence why good nutrition is important, because if it's good for our body, it's good for our brain. And if it's good for our brain, then it's good for our emotions. Whew, lots of information. And we just covered one dimension, which is the physical dimension. Second dimension, the emotional dimension. And so what do people do to be emotionally healthy or focus on the emotional dimension? There's many things. This is one of my favorite ones, because what I have to do to be emotionally healthy is do things that I enjoy. And, I like playing the guitar. I like playing chess. And so if I want to focus on, the emotional dimension, I'm going to engage in those hobbies. So engaging in hobbies and doing things that you enjoy, or if I do things that I enjoy, will definitely increase my mental health. But there's other ways to also focus on your emotional health. I'm just giving you one example. But another way, for instance, is connecting with the people you love, which is a whole other dimension of itself. But some of these dimensions do overlap. Many people use pets and animals to kind of feed that emotional dimension. We know that animals could be very therapeutic as well. Third dimension, the social dimension. Just as I mentioned that we as human beings are designed to physically move, we are also designed to connect. And when we disconnect, whoa, does it affect our mental health. Hence why many times there's prisons as consequences for people who do things that, they break the law or whatever it may be. And it's a horrible consequence, because what ends up happening is they get disconnected from society, and it creates a lot of pain. But what if I told you that there's tons of people who are not in a physical jail or a physical prison, but they're in a mental prison? They feel locked. They don't connect with others. And here's the interesting thing. That mental prison, there's no lock. You can't open it. Easier said than done, but very possible. And so socializing is a magnificent way to focus on our, to work on our mental health. Well, Luis, what if I'm an introvert? What if I appreciate my alone time? Well, I'll tell you that even introverts need social connection. The difference many times between an introvert and an extrovert is that an introvert, many times they have a small group of friends, but those connections are pretty intimate and pretty strong. And so even if you're an introvert and you don't like socializing a lot, it is still for your mental health that's important for you to stay connected. Here's another one. The spiritual dimension. So I'm a social worker and a therapist by trade. And in my studies and my school, we always, we're careful with spirituality in the sense that we don't want to impose our views. But I'll tell you something. Research after research has shown the benefits of spirituality. And for the purpose of this presentation, let's define what spirituality is. From my perspective, spirituality is a connection with something bigger than yourself. Some people connect to this spiritual dimension through religion, which is an organized way of doing it. Comes with the history and guides and people who've engaged in spiritual practices through an organization or through a group of people. But from my perspective, there's also other ways to connect to that spiritual self. People sometimes use meditation, nature. I have friends who consider themselves atheists. Yet, from my perspective, I think they're very spiritual. How is that? The groups of friends I'm thinking about, they're very altruistic. They help other people. They're big on social justice. If you ask me, that's pretty spiritual. Because it's a connection to something bigger than themselves. When we're so focused on ourselves and not connected to something bigger than us, we're more likely to lose ourselves in our own thoughts. Anyway, I could keep going on and on. Next dimension is the occupational dimension. And so yes, being occupied and working and going to school, taking care of chores at home, it's pretty healthy. If you start your morning by doing your bed, you're already working on your mental health. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. You start the day the right way by being productive. Luis, but what about those individuals who overwork, who spread themselves very thin? Well, yes. If you want to work on the occupational dimension, you want to make sure that you're not spreading yourself too thin. It's a balance. Next one is the intellectual dimension. This is an interesting one. Many years ago, the belief was that people would start dying from the moment they were born. What? Wait, explain to me this, Luis. I tend to get a little animated here. What do you mean that we start dying from the moment we're born? Well, as we age, we have these things called brain cells, and these brain cells have life expectancies. And so the older that we get, these brain cells die quicker, and they regenerate at a slower pace. Yet, we found through research that people who focus on learning the intellectual dimension, it's almost like the brain recognizes the new information that's coming in. And as that it recognizes this information, it sends signals to the brain and to other part of the body saying, regenerate those cells. We need them because there's new information coming in. So it seems like we found the fountain of youth that we've been looking for a while. If you want to stay young and you want to stay mentally healthy, learn. Stay curious. Next one. The environmental dimension. Another interesting one. Everything's interesting for me. In the environmental dimension, the idea here is that we as human beings spend a lot of times in various types of environments, some of which could be toxic. If I go to a house where there's domestic violence, where there's substance abuse issues, it's gonna be a toxic environment. If I work in a place where, my boss is a super micromanager and there's a lot of tension and pressure and people are gossiping and, saying things behind your back or my back, then it becomes a toxic work environment. And so the suggestion here is identify those environments. And when you identify those environments, if you can, stay away from them. If you cannot stay away from them because it's your job and you depend on the job to survive, or it's the home that you go to and for whatever reason you can't disconnect, limit your time there. Use your own energy to make that environment a bit more positive. Use your own energy, Luis? What? Are you giving me this new age type of stuff? No. What I mean is come with a positive attitude to the environments that you spend time in. Come with a smile. Smiles are contagious. Just like toxicity is, good attitudes are also contagious. Uncluttered places. Cluttered places have a lot of impact on how we feel. Open up the doors, the windows. Let light come in. Put a plant. There's many ways to make unhealthy environments a bit more healthy. And the last dimension here is the financial dimension. And many people, sometimes don't connect financial health with emotional or mental health. But the reality is that those two are very connected. If I don't have my finances in a way that are manageable, I'm going to be overly stressed. I'm going to lack resources. And my mental health is going to be affected. We know that when we've seen in our society like recessions or, crashes in the stock market or things along those lines, there's people that commit suicide, families that are broken. As a therapist, I've done a lot of couples therapy and family therapy, and I can't tell you how many times money is a problem. And relationships, sometimes they break apart because of financial issues. Yeah, so we spoke about how to stay emotionally healthy. Now we're going to go back to, treatment and how important it is to get treatment. But here's a sad statistic. Over half of the individuals, over half of the population with mental health issues are not getting any treatment. And for those who are in treatment, it usually takes them about 11 years from the moment they start with the first symptom to the moment they get help. 11 years. Why is that? Well, we spoke about stigma, public stigma, self-stigma. We also, have the issue of lack of resources. Unfortunately, our mental health field is not the best at this moment and needs to improve. And yes, our politicians play a big role in this, but we as a community also play a big role. Another reason why people don't seek mental health treatment or help is because they're not aware. of what mental health is or how it works. So lack of awareness, and hence why these presentations are valuable. So what happens when you do everything you can to stay mentally healthy, yet a healthy lifestyle is not good enough? You still feel horrible, you're still suffering mentally, emotionally. What happens then? That's when to seek help. That's when to speak to a professional. When you speak to a professional, could be in the form of a therapist, could be in the form of a psychiatrist. That professional can guide you through the process, could help you see the different treatment options. And just by the fact of speaking to someone, there's something so powerful about putting feelings into words. It's almost like those feelings that are painful lose their power. So these are questions that I encourage you to ask yourself to see if you should consider speaking to a professional. And some of these questions are you having issues with sleep or eating? Maybe you're not eating as much as you should. Maybe you're overeating. Having low energy. Do you feel scared, confused, on edge all the time? Hearing voices. There's a disorder that, I didn't put on the presentation for the sake of time, but called schizophrenia, where people hear voices, see things that other people don't see. There's more symptoms. But if you find yourself in that situation, it's important for you to get help. There's treatment for that. You have the inability to do the things you want to do. Work, family responsibilities, self-care. Those are things to really kind of reflect on. Here, you're going to see helplines that could be very useful. The first one I put is 211. I love 211. Back in the day, we had this thing called the Rainbow Book. I'm aging myself, hence the white hair, And the Rainbow Book was a resource book where you had all the social services. Now, it's a click away or a phone call away. So it's so if you dial 211 on your phone, it'll send you to an operator. And when you speak to the operator, you let them know exactly what type of resource you're looking for, and the operator will give you information like contact information and addresses and all that for you to get that type of help. It's nationwide, so that's the beauty about it. The next one is the crisis line for people who have suicidal thoughts. The therapeutic word or the clinical word is suicidal ideation. So now it's a lot more easy. Now you don't have to dial many numbers. Now it's 988. So you could dial 988 and you'll get somebody to help you, or you could text as well. You also have the California Warm Peer line where you could speak with someone that could listen to you. If you feel like you need to talk to someone or speak with someone about your emotions. And another one that's one of my favorites is SAMHSA's Treatment Locator. I many times use this phone number when I'm trying to connect someone to mental health services, but also to substance abuse treatment. And so you call that number, it's national, and the person on the other end of the line, they'll help you get connected or give you information on where to get connected. Here's another one of my favorite organizations, NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Lots of resources there. So family members of individuals who are having a significant mental health issue can also get help through this organization. And so here's a website, here's a phone number. And with that, I want to say a big, big thank you for your attention, and I hope that you find this presentation useful. And I think we have a question.
Have you seen any, like, what's the increase that you've seen, like, before the pandemic and after in the population, like, with mental health issues? And like, I don't know if you happen to have those numbers, or especially, or even with our youth as well.
That is an amazing question. As I mentioned, I am the executive director of Whittier Counseling Center, and in that agency, in the agency that I oversee, our numbers have doubled in terms of people seeking help, like literally within from the moment that the pandemic started. During that time there were also a lot of social unrest that was creating a lot of stress. And so if I go just based on experience, we see a lot more people getting treatment. I'm guessing that it's even more because as we learned through this presentation, there's a lot of people that don't seek help. I found some studies suggesting that instead of 1 of 5, after the pandemic, now we're seeing mental health issues in 1 in 2. So that means that, if you have a group of 10 people, at least 5 of those individuals are suffering from some type of mental health issue. In our youth, we see it a lot, and it's a big concern because youth is a high-risk population for suicide. And so we are seeing, we're seeing a lot of youth being affected by it. What we're doing at our agency is we are going to schools to provide support and emotional groups. We call them wellness clubs for high school students. So they have a place where they could learn these healthy lifestyles. But yeah, the youth is it's a high-risk population. Thank you for that question. Any other questions?
What's the difference between a therapist and a psychiatrist?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who has specialized in mental health. So they're medical doctors. Where a therapist it could be a licensed clinical social worker, a marriage and family therapist, a psychologist. There's various disciplines, various types of professionals that could be a therapist. And usually what they do is they don't prescribe medication, they do talk therapy. So thank you for that question. Yeah, bring it on.
So my son's been in therapy since age 4. There's been a lot of incidents that have happened in his life. My experience with all the therapists that he has got, either they're students or they're from the school, and they're always switching. So my question is it better to go with the licensed therapist or just allow him to do what they call the student therapist at school?
I'm loving those questions. I get a big smile. So I believe Kaiser made a study, just to answer that question, where they looked at what makes therapy very effective. And what they found that what makes therapy very effective is how much work somebody puts into it. So a lot of it has to do with the person who is seeking the help, how vested they are in their own mental health. But the interesting thing is that the second thing that made a big difference, and I read the study a while ago, so I apologize if I chop it off a little bit, but from what I remember, it is the relationship the person has with the therapist. Not whether the therapist has a license or they don't have a license, but it's just the connection that they made. So if the therapist has a good therapeutic connection with them, it's gonna make a big difference because then the person is more likely to listen to the advice. And so that's a long way to say that I would be more concerned about the quality of the relationship between the person who's getting help and the professional than the licensure. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Sí se puede. We got this. Yeah. That's a Latino in me, but Thank you again so much for your help. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here with you all, and I hope again that you find this information useful.